Let's do the recording now. Sid, what do you think? What do you think about Gillette? Let's talk about it.
I haven't seen the commercial.
You haven't seen it? You haven't been triggered? I turned it off.
You haven't been triggered.
I turned it off when it got to what's the girl's name from the Young Turks?
I don't know.
What is her name? I forget. Doesn't matter. The girl
Young
who.
Turks is where my YouTube commenting started.
Oh, really? That's funny.
I bashed them because one of their videos was. I think I told you about this. Because one of their videos was all about how like Christianity can't be real because Christians don't even believe in the Bible because in the Old Testament it says that you can't eat raw fish. It's like
Christianity debunked by the Young Turks. And like, I think the funniest thing was actually there's a part in the commercial where there are a couple of boys wrestling, and it's supposed to serve as a critique of the like the phrase "boys will be boys," which they see to be just this flippant and just like negligence of making boys be accountable for proper behavior. But the boys are having fun in it. And there have actually been a lot of studies. I should quote them. I should find them somewhere. But there have been a lot of psychological studies that show that that type of rambunctiousness, like the boys will be boys, is actually paramount to boys' psychological development. And I think Jordan Peterson talks about this a little bit too.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, I think like with the whole toxic masculinity thing, I think like most political issues, it's just that they're taken so many steps too far. It's like, okay, so if we see the problem as, like, women are more likely to be raped than men, and women are likely to be raped by men. Okay, so that's our problem. So let's figure out how to solve that, or like what we can do to whatever it may be. Like, of course, we can say that is a problem that men are more likely to rape than women are.
Yeah.
But it takes it way too far to say like men need to stop being men so that women can be women.
Yeah. I mean, it's a classic example of the pendulum simply swinging too far. Like
exactly, it's like how did we get from this one problem that is genuinely a problem that like attention should be drawn to it and we should figure out some sort of solution to all this like you've made now a joke out of yourself and no one wants to take that actual problem seriously.
Yeah. I mean, like you get it though, and this is I think is a shortcoming of conservatives is to not recognize the context behind the overreaction. Is that the reason there's such an overreaction is because there was such a disparity between what was and what ought to have been. Like women were incredibly marginalized, and so now we've swung in this complete opposite direction. And well, of course, the pendulum's going to swing too far because society is in a perpetual state of vacillation. Is vacillation the word I'm looking for? I forget. Some V word. Between different viewpoints until it eventually hopefully settles on like basically Aristotle's golden mean of hopefully like, what ought be. And so what conservatives I think do really poorly is they ignore the fact that, okay, well, why is there an overreaction? There's clearly an overreaction, but where did it come from? What caused it? And I think one way to bridge the conversation chasm between liberals and conservatives is for conservatives to just be like, yeah, you're right. Like, hey, I think you're overreacting, but I think the reason for your overreaction is legitimate. Like, yeah, women were marginalized. Like, you're coming from the right place. Not just intentions, but also from just historical veracity. Like, there's legitimacy to your complaints.
Like, facing the fact that, like, it is a fact that a conservative Christian man is more likely to be the person, like, bullying a gay guy than a liberal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, of course, like, there are some valid points being made. It's just the media, it's so much easier to take it further than it should be, but that leads to us being unproductive.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That leads to the New York State legislation.
Yeah, friggin' New York State's an idiot.
A woman who is in labor, about to give birth, that child is essentially just in an incubator. No matter what, it's going to have to come out the same way.
Oh, yeah, no, I saw a really good post on this today.
She's still going to have to go through everything. All you're doing is killing the child. That is all you're
doing. Did you get that? Did you see that on a post today on Facebook? That's why I saw that exact argument. It was like, look, like the point at which in the third trimester, I don't know the exact specific point, but basically at the very end of the pregnancy, the child is of course self-sustaining. The child can live outside of the womb, hence cesarean section. Sorry, not a C-section, but premature births coming out before the delivery date.
If you want a third trimester abortion, you are delivering the child.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing.
So what you go through up in my family law class the other day, because one of the questions I brought up is like, should the man have any say in, like, because there was basically one case that we talked about where the Supreme Court was deciding if it was constitutional for the spouse of the woman to have to sign off, or if that was an undue burden on the woman in her right to get an abortion.
Gosh.
And part of the issue is the pro-choice argument isn't that it doesn't start from the place of I will have to take care of this child for 18 plus years, because there's always adoption. Everyone knows that. It's that I have to carry the child for 9 months. So if we're at the point where the burden on your body will be the same, it's just a question of, does the child live or die? We're getting to the point of insanity if we say the child dies because it's inside of me. I want the other side to have to use the terms kill, death, child, like baby.
Well, yeah, of course,
I mean,
but
baby might be like, I understand, like call it a fetus, but you have to say I'm killing a human fetus.
well, but I mean, a fetus is only, like a very preliminary stage of human development. I mean, I think like the best way, I mean, of course, this is beneficial to conservatives, but I think it's also the most truthful, is to call it a human being. Because it is. I mean, it's irrefutably. This is entirely predicated on well-established science, biology. Science proves. People use science to. That's idiots. That irrefutably, it's human because it has unique DNA from the time of conception, and it is a being. I mean, like how. Like a being, it is distinct in its own cellular multiplication and existence. Like, given the right nutrients, it will continue on this trajectory. And so it is irrefutably a human being. So the question is, like, can we kill human beings? I think there was also a really good nuance I saw a while back, because like there was a time when I was writing a book, or like at least a paper, on arguments for being pro-life, and my basic two premises, if I remember correctly, were is it a human being? And then, like, do we care about saving human beings' lives? And basically, like, since it satisfies both those conditions, we should obviously abolish abortion. But there was a really good point made by a woman whose name I forget, who shared an article on Facebook, which said that in addition to those two premises, there's actually a third one, which is really the first one because it precedes the other two, and that is to say that, do we really care about truth? Do we actually care about the truth of things? And I think that's really true, and I think that's evident in that conversation exactly of what is the terminology we adopt, because everyone knows that there's the force of truth that lies behind words. That's why the left is so keen to call it just a clump of cells, and that's why conservatives are so keen to define it as a human being, because obviously there's a ton of emotional baggage and the force of truth that carries with those terms. And that's the thing, is like, I don't think people actually really care about the veracity of a thing. They just want to look for, of course, as we all do, and there's good psychology beyond this as to why we try to justify preconceived notions. It's because it's a lot intellectually simpler to justify things that we've already believed than to continually introduce new data that might subvert or reverse our entire worldview, because it's this worldview that we use to operate in the world. I mean, it's very reasonable that our mind does this, and it's very, in one sense, reasonable to behave so unreasonably.
Yeah.
Seems to me.
You know what I think would be good for us to do eventually?
Pot.
Maybe a podcast or something.
A podcast.
So I was just thinking about how
What do you call
actually posting that conversation.
Hell yeah. What do you call the people who watch YouTube? Like the people who create the content, or the content creators, or the YouTubers? What do you call someone who watches it? A YouTubee?
Viewers.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Viewers, yeah. To all the viewers out there, gullible suckers. Idiots. They're idiots.